I've been a silent reader for years, soaking up advice on everything from date nights to dealing with in-laws. But now, I need to pour my heart out anonymously because my world feels like it's cracking, and I don't know where else to turn. Let me start from the beginning, when everything seemed so blissfully normal. I'm 32, married to my husband Tom for 8 years. And we have 2 amazing kids, a bubbly 6-year-old girl named Lily and a rambunctious 4-year-old boy, Max. We live in a cozy suburban house with a backyard, swing set, and a kitchen that always smells like fresh-baked cookies. I run a family blog called Cozy Corners, where I share recipes, parenting hacks, and snapshots of our everyday joy. Tom works as an accountant, steady and reliable, the kind of guy who surprises me with coffee in bed on weekends. Our life isn't flashy, but it's warm and full family dinners, movie nights, and those quiet moments where I look at him and think, this is what happiness feels like. I never imagined anything could shatter that. It started on a Tuesday, nothing dramatic. Just one of those ordinary mornings where the kids are fighting over the last blueberry pancake and Tom is already in his tie, kissing the tops of their heads before heading out the door. I was clearing the breakfast dishes when I noticed his old leather wallet on the counter. Nothing unusual. He forgets it on the table all the time. But when I picked it up to put it in his coat pocket later, a folded receipt slipped out and fluttered to the floor. I didn't mean to snoop. I really didn't. I just bent to grab it, and my eyes caught the date, March 15, 2014, 11 years ago. Before we met. Before the kids. Before our whole life together. It was from a small motel in a town 3 hours away, the kind of place people stay when they're passing through war. Hiding? The charge was for one night, paid in cash. There was a handwritten note scribbled on the back in Tom's neat handwriting. Don't call. I'll explain later. My stomach did this slow, cold flip. I stood there in our sunny kitchen with the smell of maple syrup still hanging in the air, staring at those 4 words like they were written in a foreign language. I told myself it was probably nothing. An old receipt he never threw away. A forgotten errand from his single days. But the handwriting was so distinctly his, and the date. It stuck in my mind like a splinter. I slid the receipt back into the wallet, put it in his coat, and went about my day. Blog post about homemade played-out school pickup, helping Lily with her spelling list. But the splinter stayed. Every time I looked at Tom that evening, laughing at Max's terrible knock-knock jokes, helping me load the dishwasher, I felt this tiny, quiet voice asking, "What were you doing there? And why did you tell someone not to call?" For the next few days, I tried to convince myself the receipt was meaningless. Old paperwork. A one-off thing from his early 20s. People keep weird mementos, right? But the more I told myself to let it go, the louder the questions became. I started noticing things I'd never paid attention to before. Small, stupid things that probably meant nothing on their own, but together they began to feel like breadcrumbs. Like how Tom's phone is always face down when he's home. He used to leave it screen up, notifications popping freely. Now it's deliberate, almost protective. Once I asked him about it casually, "You training for the Secret Service or something?" And he laughed, said his neck was bothering him from looking down too much at work. Fair enough. But the laugh felt a second too late. Then there was the email notification I saw flash across his laptop one Saturday morning while he was in the shower. The preview line read, "That weekend in March, still thinking about you." The sender name was just initials, JR, no last name. I didn't open it. I didn't even touch the trackpad. But the subject line burned into me like a brand. I started scrolling back through old blog photos, ones I'd posted years ago when we first got married. There's a picture of us on our honeymoon, him grinning at the camera, arm around my waist. I remember how relaxed he looked, how easy everything felt. But now I wondered, was there already something behind those eyes? Something he'd buried before I ever met him. I didn't search his phone. I didn't go through drawers. I'm not that person, or at least, I didn't used to be. But I did start paying attention to silences. The way he'd sometimes stare out the window during dinner and not hear Lily when she asked him the same question twice. The way he'd change the subject whenever his college years came up, even lightly. Ancient history, he'd say with that same practiced smile. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was turning our beautiful, ordinary life into a mystery novel because of one stray receipt and a few coincidences. But the splinter had become a thorn, and every time I looked at him helping Max build a Lego tower. Kissing me goodnight, I felt the sharp little stab of doubt. And then, last Thursday, I found the key. It was one of those rainy Thursday afternoons when the kids were at after-school activities and the house felt unusually quiet. I was supposed to be editing a blog post about fall wreath ideas, but my mind was elsewhere. I ended up in our bedroom closet, reorganizing the top shelf because I needed something mindless to do with my hands. That's when I saw it. An old metal lockbox tucked behind a stack of Tom's winter sweaters. I'd never noticed it before. It was small, the kind people keep important papers in, birth certificates, passports, the deed to the house. We have a fireproof safe in the basement for the big stuff, so this one felt personal, private. The box wasn't locked, just latched. I hesitated for a full minute, heart thudding in my ears, telling myself I should leave it alone. But my fingers moved anyway. Inside were a few things that made sense at first glance. Our marriage certificate, the kids' hospital bracelets from when they were born, a couple of old passport photos of Tom from his early 20s. Then underneath a thin envelope, I found the key. It was small, brass, attached to a faded paper tag that read storage unit number 47, Pinview self-storage. No address. No date, just the number and the name. The handwriting was Tom's, again, same neat, careful letters as the motel receipt. I sat on the floor of the closet with the box in my lap, the rain tapping against the window like impatient fingers. Pinview self-storage. I'd driven past that place 100 times. It's off the highway, about 20 minutes from our house. I'd always thought it was for people moving or downsizing, not for someone who already had a full life. A wife, 2 kids, a mortgage, and a blog full of smiling family photos. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt this cold, heavy certainty settle in my chest. Whatever was in that unit, he didn't want me to know about it. And he'd kept it hidden for years. I put everything back exactly as I found it. Closed the closet door. Went downstairs. Made dinner. Smiled when Tom walked in and kissed my cheek and asked how my day was. But when I looked at him across the table that night, laughing at Lily's story about her art project, all I could think was, what else have you kept locked away? And how long have you been carrying it alone? I didn't go to Pinview self-storage right away. I told myself I wouldn't. That would be crossing a line I couldn't uncross. But the key stayed in my mind like a second heartbeat. Every time the house was quiet, it whispered. So I did what any reasonable, slightly unhinged wife would do. I Googled the place, just the name, just to see. The website was basic rows of orange metal doors, a few security cameras, month-to-month rentals, nothing sinister. But when I clicked on the locations tab, there it was, Pinview self-storage. Established 2009, with a small map pinned 3 exits past our usual grocery store. I'd driven by it countless times without ever really seeing it. That night, after the kids were asleep and Tom was downstairs watching a football game, I sat on the edge of our bed with my laptop balanced on my knees. I opened a private browser tab because apparently that makes me feel less guilty, and typed in variations of the storage unit number and the town name. Nothing useful. Then I tried something stupider. I searched Tom's full name plus Pinview plus storage. No hits. Of course not. He's not careless enough to leave digital footprints like that. But I kept going because stopping felt worse than continuing. I searched old social media accounts he barely uses anymore. His college-era Facebook, the one with photos of him and his roommates at parties I was never part of. I scrolled back further than I ever had, past our engagement pictures, past college graduation, into the blurry years right after he dropped out of grad school for a semester. There were a few posts from 2014, nothing obvious. a photo of a sunset over a lake, a check-in at a coffee shop in that same small town where the motel receipt was from, a vague status update. Sometimes you have to disappear for a while to figure out who you are. I stared at that sentence for so long the screen went dark. When Tom came upstairs later, he found me sitting in the dark with the laptop closed. He asked if I was okay. I said I had a headache. He kissed my forehead, told me to get some rest, and went to brush his teeth. I lay there in the dark listening to the sound of water running, wondering how many nights I'd slept beside a man who had an entire chapter of his life padlocked 20 minutes from our front door. The next morning, I made pancakes like nothing had changed. But something had. The perfect picture was starting to peel at the edges, and I couldn't stop picking at it. I waited until Saturday. Tom had a rare half day at the office, and the kids were at my sister's for a sleepover. The house felt too big and too quiet without them, which was perfect. I needed the silence to think. Or maybe to stop thinking. I took the key from the lockbox, slipped it into the pocket of my jeans, and drove. 23 minutes exactly. The storage facility looked exactly like the website. Rows of identical orange doors, a keypad at the gate, a small office with a flickering neon open sign. I punched in the guest code from the website they let you in for prospective renters, parked near the back, and walked. Unit 47 was in the third row, halfway down. Nothing special about it. A standard 10 by 10 roll-up door, slightly dented at the bottom like someone had kicked it once. My hands shook as I fed the key into the padlock. It turned easily, like it had been used recently. I lifted the door just enough to duck underneath. The smell hit me first. Musty cardboard, old paper, something faintly chemical like old film. Light from the hallway spilled in. There were maybe a dozen boxes stacked neatly against the back wall, labeled in Tom's handwriting, college, books, MISC. One box stood apart, unmarked, smaller than the others. I opened that one first. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Not our wedding, not the kids. These were older, faded at the edges. Tom younger, thinner, hair longer, standing outside that same motel from the receipt. Tom laughing with a woman I didn't recognize. She had dark hair, a bright smile, and in every photo she was looking at him like he was the only person in the world. There were more, the two of them at a diner, on a hiking trail, in a small apartment with mismatched furniture. One picture showed her hand on his chest, his arms around her waist. They looked happy, young, in love. At the bottom of the box was a thin stack of letters tied with a rubber band. The top envelope was addressed to Tom in careful, looping handwriting. No return address. I didn't open them. I couldn't, not yet. There was also a single ultrasound photo. Black and white, grainy. The date printed in the corner, February 2014, 8 months before we met. I sat on the cold concrete floor of that storage unit, surrounded by the life he'd never told me about. And for the first time since the receipt, I started to cry, quietly, the kind of crying that hurts your throat because you're trying so hard not to make noise. I didn't take anything. I didn't photograph it. I just closed the box, lowered the door, locked it, and drove home. When I walked back into our kitchen, the same kitchen where we'd made pancakes that morning, everything looked the same. The kids' drawings on the fridge. The coffee pot still half full. The faint smell of last night's lasagna. But nothing felt the same. I washed my face, reapplied mascara, and started dinner like it was any other Saturday. Because what else do you do when the man you've built your entire world around turns out to have had another one first? The next week passed in a kind of slow-motion blur. I kept the secret the way you carry a stone in your shoe. Every step hurts, but you keep walking anyway because stopping would mean dealing with it. I smiled at Tom when he came home. I laughed at his jokes. I kissed him goodnight and let him pull me close like nothing had changed. But inside, everything had. Every touch felt like it belonged to someone else's story. Every I love you tasted like a question I couldn't ask yet. I started avoiding the blog. The drafts, sad and touched posts about gratitude journals, slow family Sundays, The little things that make a house a home. I couldn't write them. The words felt dishonest now, like I was selling a version of us that I no longer fully believed in. The kids didn't notice. Or maybe they did in the small, wordless ways children do. Lily asked why I seemed quiet sad one morning while I braided her hair. I told her I was just tired. She hugged me anyway, fierce and small, and I held on a little too long. I thought about confronting him every single day. I rehearsed the conversation in my head while folding laundry, while driving to pick up Max from preschool, while lying awake at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling fan. I imagined every tone: calm, angry, hurt, understanding. None of them felt right. The ultrasound photo haunted me most. That grainy little shape. A heartbeat that wasn't ours. A child who never became part of this life. I didn't know if the pregnancy continued, if there was a child out there somewhere with Tom's eyes, or if it ended before it began. I didn't know who the woman was: wife, girlfriend, almost something. I didn't know if she was still in his life in some quiet, hidden way. And the worst part? I still loved him, even with the photos and the letters and the storage unit and the motel receipt and the changed phone habits and the vague Facebook posts. I still loved the man who made goofy voices to make Max giggle, who remembered my coffee order without asking, who held my hand during scary movies even though he pretends he's not scared. That love didn't disappear. It just got tangled up with something darker: betrayal, fear, the sick realization that the person I trusted most in the world had built our entire marriage on a foundation that wasn't completely honest. I knew I couldn't keep pretending forever. So last night, after the kids were asleep and the house was finally still, I made tea. 2 mugs, chamomile, the kind he likes when he can't sleep. I carried them into the living room where he was reading on the couch, glasses low on his nose, looking so familiar it hurt. I sat across from him. I said, "We need to talk." He looked up slowly. Something flickered in his eyes: recognition, maybe, or dread. And just like that, the pretending was over. He set the book down slowly, like he knew this moment had been coming for a long time. The living room lamp cast soft shadows across his face, making him look older than he is. Or maybe that was just the weight of what was about to happen. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just held the mug of tea between my hands like it was the only thing keeping me grounded and said, "I found the storage unit. I went there. I saw the photos, the letters, the ultrasound." Silence stretched between us, thick and terrible. His face didn't crumple the way I thought it might. Instead, it went very still, like someone had hit pause on every emotion he usually wears easily. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. "A week. Maybe a little more." My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat, careful. "I didn't mean to look. It started with a receipt that fell out of your wallet. Then the key. Then." I couldn't stop. He nodded once, slowly. Looked down at his hands. "I should have told you years ago." The admission landed like a stone in still water. No denial, no deflection. Just quiet truth. Who was she? I asked. Her name was Jenna. He said it like the words still hurt to form. We were together for almost 3 years. Met in college, stayed together after I dropped out for a semester. She was everything I thought I wanted back then. We talked about marriage. We talked about kids. He paused, swallowed. She got pregnant in early 2014. We were scared, excited, completely unprepared. Then she miscarried at 12 weeks. It broke something in both of us. We tried to hold it together, but we couldn't. We fought constantly. About the grief, about money, about whose fault it was even though it wasn't anyone's fault. One night I just left. Checked into that motel. Stayed for a week. Told her not to call because I didn't know how to face her. Or myself. I listened. Every word felt like it was carving out a new space inside me. After that, he continued, I moved back in with my parents for a while. Cut contact. Moved cities. Met you 6 months later at that coffee shop near the train station. You smiled at me when I spilled my drink, and for the first time in months I felt like I could breathe again. I told myself the past was done, buried, that if I never spoke about it, it couldn't hurt us. He finally looked up at me, eyes red-rimmed but steady. I was wrong. I know that now. I should have told you. I should have trusted you with the broken parts, not just the good ones. I didn't speak right away. I just sat there, letting the story settle around us like dust after something heavy has fallen. Do you still love her? The question slipped out before I could stop it. The one I'd been most afraid to ask. He shook his head, slow and certain. No, I loved her then. I grieved her. I grieved what we lost. But that part of my life ended the day I walked away. You're the one I choose. You're the one I keep choosing. Every day, the tea had gone cold in my hands. I believed him. That was the hardest part. I believed every word, but belief didn't erase the hurt. It didn't erase the feeling that I'd been living in a house with a locked room I'd never been allowed to enter. I set the mug down, looked at him, really looked. The man who still made me laugh until my sides hurt. The man who cried when Lily said her first full sentence. The man who had carried this secret like a backpack full of bricks for 11 years. I don't know what to do with this yet, I said finally. I don't know if I can just forgive it or pretend it didn't happen. But I also don't want to lose us. Not over something that ended before we even started. He nodded. Didn't reach for my hand. Didn't try to fix it with words. Just sat there with me in the wreckage. I'll answer anything you want to ask, he said. No more locked rooms. No more secrets. Whatever you need. I didn't answer right away. I just let the silence hold us both down because, for the first time in weeks, the silence didn't feel like a threat. It felt like the beginning of something honest. The days after that first real conversation felt like walking on new ice, thin in places, solid in others. Impossible to tell which was which until you stepped. We agreed on a few ground rules without ever calling them rules. No more secrets. If something felt heavy, we'd say it out loud, even if the timing was terrible. We'd give each other space when we needed it, but not too much space. And we wouldn't pretend everything was fixed just because we talked once. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the shadow crept back in. Like when I'd catch myself staring at old wedding photos on the fridge and wondering if he'd ever shown Jenna the same soft smile he gave me that day. Or when he'd reach for my hand in the car and I'd flinch, not on purpose, just reflex, and we'd both go quiet for the rest of the drive. But there were other moments too. Small, stubborn ones that reminded me why I'd said I do in the first place. One evening, about 10 days after the talk, Max woke up screaming from a nightmare. The kind where he's convinced there's a monster under the bed that wants to eat his toes. Tom was already halfway down the hall before I even sat up. I followed a minute later and found him on the floor beside Max's bed, flashlight in hand, solemnly inspecting every inch under the mattress. See? No monsters, Tom said, voice low and sure. Just dust bunnies. And maybe a lost Lego or two, Max sniffled. Then giggled when Tom pretended to be scared of the Lego. He crawled into Tom's lap, arms around his neck, and fell back asleep almost instantly. I stood in the doorway watching them, and something in my chest loosened just a fraction. That tenderness wasn't an act. It wasn't something he'd practiced for a camera or a blog post. It was real. And it was ours. Later, when we were back in bed, Tom whispered into the dark, I'm scared you're going to wake up one day and decide this isn't worth it. I didn't answer right away. I let the words hang there. Then I said, I'm scared of the same thing. But I'm more scared of walking away without giving us the chance to carry this properly. He reached for my hand under the covers. This time I didn't pull away. We didn't make love that night. We didn't need to. We just held hands like two people who'd been lost at sea and finally found the same piece of driftwood. The next morning I opened my laptop and started a new blog post. Not the cheerful one I'd been avoiding. Something different. Title: When the picture isn't perfect anymore. I didn't write about the storage unit or Jenna or the ultrasound. I wrote about how sometimes the most beautiful parts of a family aren't the post photos or the matching pajamas on Christmas morning. Sometimes they're the quiet, messy moments when you choose to stay even when it hurts. When you learn to love someone's scars instead of pretending they don't exist. I didn't publish it. Not yet. It felt too raw, too close to the bone, but writing it helped. Like breathing out after holding my breath for weeks. I'm still angry sometimes. I still hurt, but I'm also still here, still choosing. One careful step at a time across this fragile new ice. The weeks after that leaf-throwing afternoon started to feel less like walking on cracking ice and more like learning to skate on it, wobbly, uncertain, but moving forward. That we kept the conversations going. Not every night, not long interrogations. Just little pieces here and there when the moment felt safe. He told me more about Jenna, not to defend anything, just to let me see the full picture. How they'd met in a late-night philosophy class neither of them needed. How she collected vintage postcards and used to pin them to the wall of their tiny apartment like a map of places they'd never been. How the miscarriage happened on a rainy Tuesday and they both pretended it was fine until it wasn't. Hearing her name didn't sting as much anymore. It started to feel like hearing about an old friend of his from college, one who mattered once deeply, but who belonged to a different chapter. A chapter that closed before mine ever opened. I asked the question I'd been avoiding the longest. Was there ever a child? After the miscarriage, did you? He shook his head. No, she never had kids. At least, not that I know of. We didn't speak after I left. I blocked her number. She blocked mine. I made sure there were no loose ends I'd have to explain later. The relief was instant and guilty. I hated that part of me was glad there wasn't a child out there carrying half his DNA, half someone else's grief. It made the wound feel smaller, more containable. In return, I started sharing my own shadows. The quiet fear I'd carried since Lily was born, that I wasn't enough as a mother, that the blog was just a pretty mask over my insecurities, that one day he'd wake up and see me the way I sometimes saw myself, ordinary, tired, not particularly special. He listened without trying to fix it. Just held my hand and said, I see you every day, all of it. And I still choose you. We started doing things again. Not big gestures, small ones. A walk after the kids were in bed, just around the block. Hands in pockets because it was December now and the air bit. Coffee dates on Saturday mornings while my mom watched the kids. He even helped me finish that draft I'd started, the one about imperfect pictures, and when I read the last paragraph aloud, he had tears in his eyes. You should post it, he said quietly. Not for the likes, for you. I wasn't ready yet. But I saved it in the folder labeled Drafts That Matter. Christmas came. We did all the usual things: tree, cookies, matching pajamas nobody really wanted to wear, but everybody wore anyway. When the kids tore into presents on Christmas morning, shrieking over Lego sets and new books, I watched Tom's face. The way his eyes went soft when Lily threw her arms around his neck and said, "You're the best daddy in the whole galaxy." The way he looked at me across the wrapping paper chaos and mouthed, "Thank you for surviving this." For staying, I mouthed back, "We're not done yet," and I meant it. The shadow is still there. Some days it's longer than others. Some days I still wake up wondering if trust can ever be whole again once it's been cracked. But I'm learning that maybe it doesn't have to be perfect to be strong. Maybe it just has to be honest and patched with care, and chosen every morning even when it's hard. We're still here, still choosing, still building something new out of what almost broke us. And that feels like the truest kind of cozy I've known in a long time. It didn't happen right away. For a while we coasted on fragile goodwill, careful words, extra kindnesses, the kind of gentleness you give something still healing. But scars don't disappear just because you stop picking at them. Sometimes they itch. It was a Friday night in late January. The kids were finally asleep after a long day of indoor fort building and too much hot chocolate. We were in the kitchen, cleaning up, the radio playing softly in the background. I was wiping counters. Tom was loading the dishwasher. I don't even remember what started it. Something small. He asked if I wanted to go to his parents for dinner the next weekend, and I said maybe. And he said, "You always say maybe lately." And I heard something in his tone, frustration, maybe, or hurt, and it lit a match I didn't know was still dry. I set the sponge down harder than I meant to. "You don't get to be impatient with me about this." He turned slowly. "I'm not trying to be. I'm trying to move forward. And it feels like every time I suggest something normal, you pull back." "Normal," I laughed, and it came out sharp. "You hid an entire relationship, a pregnancy, a loss, for years. And now you want me to pretend we can just snap back to normal dinner plans like nothing happened." He closed the dishwasher door quietly. "Too quietly. I'm not asking you to pretend. I'm asking you to let me show you I'm still here, that I'm not going anywhere. That this," he gestured between us, the kitchen, the whole house, "is what I want." Every day, I felt the anger rise like heat behind my eyes. Then why does it still feel like I'm living with two versions of you? The one I thought I knew, and the one who kept a whole life in a storage unit. He rubbed the back of his neck, the same gesture he makes when he's tired or cornered. "Because I messed up, I know that. I should have told you before we got married, before the kids. I was ashamed. I was scared you'd look at me and see someone who runs when things get hard. And maybe you do now." The words hung there. Heavy, true. I looked at him, really looked, and saw the man who was trying so hard to fix what he'd broken, and the man who had broken it in the first place. Both were real. Both were him. "I don't want to hate you," I said, voice cracking for the first time in weeks. "But sometimes I'm so angry I can't breathe. And I hate that too, because I still love you. And loving you makes the anger hurt more." He didn't move closer. He just stood there, letting me say it. "I'm not asking you to stop being angry," he said after a long pause. "I'm asking you to keep telling me when you are. Don't bury it. Don't smile through it. Just let me carry some of it, please." I didn't answer right away. I turned back to the counter, picked up the sponge again, started wiping the same spot I'd already cleaned. Tears dropped onto the granite, small dark circles that spread and disappeared. Eventually, I said, "I need time. Not forever, but more than this. I need to feel safe again, really safe." "And I don't yet," he nodded. "Okay." No argument. No defense. Just okay. We finished cleaning in silence. When we went upstairs, he still asked if I wanted him in the bed or on the couch. I said the bed. We still didn't touch. But when the lights went out, I whispered into the dark, "Thank you for not pushing." He whispered back, "Thank you for not leaving." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't resolution. It was just two people who still wanted to try, even when it felt impossible. And sometimes, in the middle of a long winter, that's the only light you've got. February came and went in shades of gray, slush, and short days. March arrived like someone finally remembered to turn the lights back on. Crocuses pushing through the last patches of snow, longer evenings, the kind of hope that sneaks in when you're not looking. We kept going to therapy. Once a week, Tuesday evenings after the kids were in bed with the sitter. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting matches or breakthrough epiphanies under fluorescent lights. Just two tired people sitting on a worn leather couch, talking about trust the way you might talk about learning a new language, slowly, with a lot of mistakes, and occasional moments when the sentence suddenly makes sense. The therapist asked me once what forgiveness would look like. I said I didn't know if I believed in forgiveness the way people talk about it, like a switch you flip and everything's clean again. I told her I thought maybe it was more like scar tissue. The wound closes, it's stronger in that spot than it was before, but you can still feel the ridge when you run your finger over it. Tom nodded beside me. He said he was learning to live with the ridge. We started small rituals again. Sunday morning pancakes. But now he makes them and I sit at the island with coffee, watching him flip them with that same focused look he's had since we were dating. Sometimes Lily helps, standing on her step stool, tongue poking out in concentration. Max usually ends up covered in batter. It's messy and loud and exactly the kind of ordinary I almost lost. One Saturday in early April, the kids were at a birthday party, and the house was quiet. Tom asked if I wanted to go for a drive just us. No plan, no destination. I said yes before I could overthink it. We ended up at a little lake about 40 minutes away. The same lake he'd posted a sunset photo of back in 2014, the one I'd found when I was digging through old Facebook. I didn't mention it, neither did he. We just parked, walked the path around the water, found a bench that still had morning dew on it. He sat first. I sat beside him, not touching, but close enough that our shoulders almost brushed. After a while, he said, "This is where I used to come when things with Jenna got bad." After the miscarriage, I'd sit here for hours trying to figure out how to be a person again. I looked out at the water, flat and silver under the pale spring sun. "Does it hurt to be here now?" "A little," he admitted. "But it hurts less with you beside me." I didn't say anything for a minute. Then I reached over and laced my fingers through his. His hand was warm, familiar, still mine. We sat there until the sun started to dip and the air turned cool again. When we stood to leave, I said, "I think I'm ready to post that draft." He looked at me, surprised. "The one about imperfect pictures?" "Yeah." He smiled small, careful, real. "I think that's a good idea." On the drive home, with the radio low and the windows cracked, I felt something shift. Not all the way. Not completely. But enough that the shadow didn't feel like it was following us anymore. It was just walking beside us, part of the landscape now. When we got home, the kids were still out. I opened my laptop at the kitchen table, pulled up the draft. Read it one more time. Then I hit publish. The title stayed the same. When the picture isn't perfect anymore, I didn't include the whole story. Just enough truth to make it honest. Enough hope to make it worth reading. Within an hour, the comments started coming in. People saying thank you. People sharing their own ridges and scars. People saying they were still choosing to. Tom came up behind me, rested his chin on my shoulder. Read the screen. He didn't say anything. He just kissed the side of my head and whispered, "I'm proud of you." I closed my eyes, let the words settle, let the house hold us both. We're not perfect, we never were, but we're real. And right now. That feels like the strongest thing we've got. The post went live on a quiet Sunday afternoon in mid-April. I didn't announce it anywhere special. No big new post alert story on Instagram. No email newsletter blast. I just clicked publish, closed the laptop, and went outside to help Lily plant marigold seeds in the little garden bed by the porch. The numbers climbed slowly at first. A few likes from regular readers. A handful of comments saying this feels so real and thank you for the honesty. Then, around dinner time, it started to pick up. Shares, more comments. People tagging friends. By bedtime, the post had more views than anything I'd written in the last 6 months. I didn't check obsessively. I told myself I wouldn't, but I did peek once after the kids were asleep. The comment section had become a kind of quiet gathering place, women and a few men sharing their own stories of cracks and repairs. One reader wrote, "My husband had a whole year of his life he never explained. We're still working through it. Reading this made me feel less alone tonight." Another said, "I left after my discovery. No regrets. But seeing someone choose to stay is brave too. Thank you for showing both sides can be true." Tom read them with me. We sat on the couch, shoulder to shoulder, scrolling in silence. When we reached the bottom, he closed the tab and said, "You gave people a soft place to land tonight. That's more than most blogs ever do." I didn't know what to say. I just leaned my head against his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around me, tentative at first, like he was still waiting for permission. I didn't pull away. The next morning, the inbox had messages. Some were long. Some were short. One woman sent photos of her own storage unit find from years ago, a box of love letters from her husband's first marriage. She wrote that they'd gone to counseling, rebuilt slowly, and were celebrating their 20th anniversary next month. She ended with, "It's not perfect, but it's ours." And that's enough. I cried reading it. Quiet tears, the kind that feel like release instead of pain. Tom saw me from the kitchen doorway, coffee mug in hand. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just came over, set the mug down, and held me until the crying stopped. That week we started something new. Every Sunday evening, after the kids were in bed, we'd sit at the kitchen table with 2 cups of tea and talk about one thing good or bad that happened that week. No judgment, no fixing, just listening. Sometimes it was small, Max learning to ride his bike without training wheels. Sometimes it was harder, me admitting I still felt a pain when I thought about the ultrasound photo. He'd listen, then tell me one thing he was grateful for that week. Usually it involved me, or the kids, or both. It wasn't therapy. It wasn't dramatic. It was just us, showing up. One Sunday in May, after we'd finished talking, I looked at him across the table and said, "I think I'm ready to let the storage unit go." He raised his eyebrows. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we don't need to keep it. The photos, the letters, the ultrasound, they're part of your past. I've seen them. I've heard the story. I don't need them sitting in a locker 20 minutes away like a ghost we're both pretending isn't there." He was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. "Okay, what do you want to do with it all?" I thought about it. "We could keep the ultrasound photo, if you want, in a small box somewhere safe. Something to honor what happened without hiding it. The rest. Maybe we can shred the letters, burn the photos if that feels right, or donate the boxes to a thrift store. Let them become someone else's history." He reached across the table and took my hand. I like that. Letting it go. Not erasing it, just releasing it. We made the plan for the following weekend. No rush, no ceremony. Just 2 people closing a chapter together. I still don't know if the scar tissue will ever feel completely smooth. I still catch myself wondering on quiet nights what life would have looked like if he told me on our 3rd date instead of 11 years later. But those questions don't keep me awake anymore. They just pass through, like clouds on a breezy day. We're still here. Still choosing, still building, and the house feels warmer than it has in a long time. It's been almost a year since the receipt slipped out of that old wallet and everything tilted. We did what we planned that May weekend. We drove to Pineview Self-Storage on a bright Saturday morning while the kids were at soccer practice with my sister. The roll-up door went up with the same quiet rumble it always had. The boxes were still there, patient and dusty. We didn't speak much while we sorted. Tom kept the ultrasound photo. Just that one small print. He slipped it into an envelope, sealed it, and tucked it into the back of our fireproof safe downstairs next to the kids' birth certificates and the deed to the house. A quiet acknowledgement that something real had happened once, even if it never became part of this life. The letters, the rest of the photos, the motel receipt, they went into a shredder at the local office supply store. We watched the machine eat them in long, curling ribbons. It felt final, but not violent. More like turning the last page of a book you'll never reread. We donated the empty boxes and the college and MISC ones to Goodwill. Someone else will use them for their own new beginnings. The blog post stayed up. It still gets shared sometimes, usually by people in the middle of their own hard seasons. Every now and then I'll get a message from someone saying they read it at 2 a.m. while their partner slept on the couch, and it gave them the courage to start a conversation the next morning. I never know what to say back except I'm glad you're not carrying it alone. Our Sundays still have tea and talking. Some weeks it's like Max's new obsession with dinosaurs, Lily's latest school play. Some weeks it's heavier, but the heaviness doesn't scare me anymore. It just feels like part of the furniture. Tom still forgets his wallet on the counter sometimes. I still notice. But now when I pick it up, I don't hold my breath waiting for something to fall out. There's nothing left to hide. The kids are growing fast. Lily lost her first tooth last month and insisted on writing the tooth fairy a thank you note. Max can now ride his bike all the way to the end of the block without looking back. They still fight over the last pancake. We still make them every Sunday. And when the house is quiet at night, when the kids are asleep and the only sounds are the hum of the fridge and the soft creak of the house settling, Tom and I sit on the couch sometimes. Not always touching. Sometimes just side by side with our own thoughts. But we're there, together. I don't think about Jenna much anymore. When I do, it's with something closer to compassion than pain. I hope she's found her own soft place to land. I hope she's happy. The shadow is still part of the landscape. You don't erase 11 years of silence overnight, but it doesn't loom the way it used to. It's more like the long evening shadow of the oak tree in our backyard there when the sun is low, but never permanent. The light changes. The shadow moves. Our marriage isn't the same as it was before. It's quieter in some places, deeper in others, more honest than it's ever been. It's still cozy, not the shiny, filtered kind I used to chase for the blog. The real kind. The kind that holds room for mistakes, for grief, for second chances. The kind that survives winter and still puts out new leaves in spring. I still love him. He still loves me. We still choose each other every day, even the hard ones. And that, I think, is the truest story I'll ever tell. Thank you for listening. I'm going to keep writing, not because everything is perfect now, but because sometimes the most beautiful pictures are the ones that show the cracks and the light coming through them anyway. Take care of yourselves out there. And if you're carrying something heavy, I hope you find someone safe to set it down with.